Trump did a couple of those things back when he was the president, and that just it looked horrible. And I would think Sunak certainly is no Donald Trump, and certainly would be a wiser head.
Now, Rishi Sunak has apologised and said it was a mistake not to stay in France for an international event to mark the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. We've heard much of the reaction to that choice here in the UK, but how is this playing out internationally? Let's speak to Jim Townsend, who's former Deputy Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO under Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Good evening, Jim.
Good evening. How are you?
Very good, thank you. It's been a right old ruckus here about this decision. Do you have any sympathies with the Prime Minister, or are you rather, do you think it's a bizarre decision, as many have said, and also offensive to the veterans?
Well, I'd say all the above. I would say I'm sympathetic because poor guy, it just seems he's always running into issues, whether his announcement, of course, he made it in the rain, and this just seems like everything is going wrong for him. So on a humanistic level, I'm sorry that he's going through such trouble. But I think that in terms of what happened specifically during the D-Day ceremonies, golly, I don't know who he's got doing his political moves, but I think at D-Day is where you park politics. You take that's no longer in the conversation in dealing with what happened on June 6th, 1944, and particularly for the UK. The UK, a big player in that, and it wasn't just the US. Here in Washington, it's all about us. But the UK was a huge player. So was Canada. And so it's a bad look. And again, I'm sympathetic for him. I'm not, well, I feel bad for him. I'm not necessarily sympathetic.
But you're pretty gobsmacked by the decision to sort of scuttle back to the UK to do a TV interview.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's a bad look. Trump did a couple of those things back when he was the president, and that just it looked horrible. And I would think Sunak certainly is no Donald Trump, and certainly would be a wiser head than Trump. But if I have to point any fingers, I would say it's his political handlers. Certainly, they should have thought that through on how that looks. I mean, there's probably no more sacrosanct time than June 6th, and being at D-Day with the French and with the Americans. That's like high church.
And just finally, I mean, we saw it all unfolding live on our TV screens. There was Joe Biden, there was Emmanuel Macron, Scholz, the German leader, and David Cameron sort of on the edge of the group. What do you think Joe Biden would have made of the fact that the Prime Minister just wasn't there and there was this guy who used to be Prime Minister instead?
Well, I'm sure Biden, who is an old Paul, he knows his way around politics. I'm sure he saw that and had a little smirk on his face, like, "Oh my goodness, the Brits! What's happening here?" I'm sure that he was, he probably shook his head and said, "Who does he have handling him?"
Do you think there is a bit of a sort of smirking at the situation that we find ourselves in on the international stage? Since Brexit.
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't put it that way. I know what you mean. I wouldn't call it a smirk. I think, UK, you've got a lot of backers. I'll just have to speak from the US and from the Washington perspective. UK, we depend on you all, and we enjoy being close with you. And so it wouldn't be a smirk. I think we hurt when you encounter obstacles. And I hope as you get into the next election that a lot of these things will be sorted out. I mean, we're always going to be there with you guys.
But the special relationship you hope will get put back on a better footing.
Well, I think it'll be a happier footing. I think that there'll be we'll finally feel that the engine is running as it should in London, and things are going well. But elections sort these things out, and we're just hoping that the elections go well, and we're looking forward to the results, as you're looking forward to our results too.
Well, I was going to say elections don't always sort things out, but Jim Townsend, former Deputy Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO, thank you very much for joining us. Well, let's turn now to France, and we're now joined by General Dominique Trinquant, who's former head of the French military mission to the UN and NATO, and an advisor to Emmanuel Macron. Good evening to you, Dominique.
Good evening.
How do you think this looked for the Prime Minister to leave Normandy early?
I mean, on the French side, I'm not sure that anyone noticed that the Prime Minister has left during this ceremony. In the morning there was the King, In the afternoon, there was the son, Prince William. And for France, they are representing their country. So I'm not sure that anyone noticed that. Many things were focused on President Biden, of course, on President Macron. And in France, I just look at the papers today, and in fact, French journalists were shocked by the fact that President Macron arrived late at the British ceremony in the morning, and they were more focusing on that on the absence of UK Prime Minister.
But doesn't that speak volumes that what has become a very big story here, it's barely noticed on the continent? Doesn't that say something about Britain's standing in France now after Brexit?
Yeah, probably you're right. At the same time, we've got election on next Sunday on Europe, and of course, Britain is not part of it. So we're not talking about UK about that. I think that we in France, in a way, want to speak with UK on political and military things, defense things. But we are no longer part of the same community, so which is a bit sad. On my side, I find it's very sad.
Do you think that President Macron would welcome a new leader, Keir Starmer, if he does win the election, that this will be someone you can do business with?
Oh, yes, certainly, because a new leader wants to organize something, a liaison between Europe and UK, even after Brexit, will be most welcome, I think. I think so, because anyway, UK is part of Europe. And it's not because you are not part of the European Union that we don't have many matters to deal together.
General Dominique Trinquant, thank you very much for joining us. Former head of the French military mission to the UN and NATO and former advisor to Emmanuel Macron there.